Co-mediation means that you have two mediators, usually. I've actually been in a big family mediation where there were three mediators, but it's generally two. And the two mediators collaborate, and I can talk more about sort of the process that hopefully will make it a good team. Sometimes they're sort of equally experienced and have had lots of time, experience working together. Other times, one may be kind of a junior mediator who's just come out of training with a more experienced mediator. Sometimes they're people who've never mediated together before. There are a number of things that I think parties can gain, and it's also hard for me to totally separate the value for parties and the value for mediators, because if mediators are deriving a certain value from it, hopefully they will be better mediators and conduct a better process. But starting with parties, with two mediators, optimally, you get two sets of eyes and ears and attention to the very complex things that can go on in mediation, not just the quote-unquote facts or the stories that people are telling, but also the body language, the sort of emotional tone, the shifts, and that's a lot for anybody to pay attention to. But with two mediators who are, again, we hope collaborating effectively and communicating, they can almost have both a bigger and a more precise lens from which to look. I think the other thing is co-mediation teams can model or reflect some of the kinds of parties that may come to mediation, especially in community mediation programs. So you can have, a male-female team. You can have people from different ethnic, racial backgrounds mediating together. I think also, and again, relates to the mediators, but I think co-mediation provides a wonderful kind of learning experience and hopefully quality control for the mediators in the mediation, so that if mediators are, learning from each other, they're hopefully going to do a better job. And the other thing is that they can model communication with each other. We're big fans at HMP of transparency, so that you don't have to sort of whisper to your co-mediator, but you can say, Mushegh, do you think this might be a good time to take a break? And then you might say, well, I have a few more questions I want to ask, and then sure, maybe we could do it, but can I just follow this line of questioning? And so it's a way of showing that people can communicate. That's not a very high conflict kind of communication, but there may be differences in the styles. There definitely can be differences in styles. Well, I think, again, in the best of all possible worlds, the complementarity and the balancing will be sort of cordial and amicable and work well. And I'm thinking, somebody I mediate with a lot in Roxbury Court, he kind of jokes that I'm the person who provides, I address the feelings. But I noticed the other day we co-mediated, and he was the one who made some acknowledgement of a kind of emotional issue. And later I said, Ed, it's not just me, you do it too. So I think, again, we can balance, but we can also learn from each other. And I think I do learn from people who can be a little more, sort of cut to the chase and sort of aware of maybe pushing parties a little bit more about assumption exploration and reality testing. Another way that mediators can complement each other, as I said, is sort of cultural or ethnic and linguistic. I mean, again, in the best of all possible worlds, all mediations could take place in the language of the parties, although sometimes you have parties who speak different languages. But I think a mediator who speaks the native language of at least one of the parties, even if that party is speaking English in the mediation, can possibly pick up on things, again, may connect more with that party. And sometimes, unfortunately, since interpreters aren't flawless themselves, sometimes a mediator who speaks the language that an interpreter is making an interpretation of may notice that the interpreter is not quite interpreting properly, and of course that would call for a caucus and maybe a private meeting with the interpreter. Well, what comes to mind immediately, we have in the past, and hopefully we will do again in the future, done parent-teen mediations, which usually are civil, sometimes they're minor criminal situations. And I think the age balance of a mediator like me with, say, a Harvard law student it makes it much easier for that age difference in the parties to kind of feel like at least somebody's attending to them. And again, that sort of immediate sense of, I don't just have two old ladies or an old man or an old lady, there's a younger person who might listen to me better. So I think that, I think also the other kinds of family mediations where it's a couple, and again, if it's a heterosexual couple, that you have a gender balance there. I think landlord-tenant mediations, well, of course I'm biased because occasionally I've solo mediated because sometimes there's nobody available and I am allowed to do that in the program. But I really appreciate in those cases, because those are both very high stakes. These are summary process evictions cases, so we're talking about somebody possibly losing their home. And sometimes there are more legal issues, and certainly more consequential legal issues in those cases than, say, in small claims court. So I particularly appreciate having a co-mediator there, and I can talk at some point if it's useful about a mediation I just did this morning. So my co-mediator is a lawyer as well as an experienced mediator. And we ran into some, turned out not to be ethical issues, but there was some concern, and certainly concern about informed consent and so forth. So being able to talk through that with my co-mediator in private caucus was enormously important and made me feel much more comfortable. He brought certain things to the table and I brought some things to the table. And so I think this was a case where they presented it to us, the landlords that have said, oh, this is easy, we've come to an agreement. We ended up spending 2 hours in that mediation because things had to really be carefully fleshed out and explored and so forth. Well, the first thing is to take a mediator's caucus and talk it out. And I can tell you from my own experience that that has been enormously instructive for me. To sort of the bottom line in our program is that if since we operate as a team, if the mediator who feels less comfortable, even after talking it through, that decision needs to be honored, and both mediators end the mediation. So, but I wanted to just read something. So some of my clinical students write these reflective journals, and the last day of training they have an ethical dilemma that's a little contrived in a role play we do. And she wrote her entire journal about the value of co-mediation in this role play, that she had been wanting to sort of continue the mediation and do more reality testing and assumption exploration. Her co-mediator thought this could be a problem and also was worried about the informed consent of one of the parties. So I just want to read what she said. She talked about that they really she and her co-mediator really respected each other and sort of tested each other's assumptions. I mean, it's almost like co-mediation we use the same skills as we do in facilitative mediation. So she said, one of the values of co-mediation is, especially if it's a difficult mediation, either emotionally or your neutrality is really being tested, or there are these possible ethical issues. With your co-mediator, the co-mediator helps to shoulder the burden. And then she said, and it also provides you with someone to hone your methods and honor the facilitative process. And I thought that was such a beautiful description of what I certainly believe is the value of co-mediation. Okay, I don't know if it wouldn't have been possible, but it would have been, I think, a less effective process. So this was a parent-teen mediation some years ago, and I was co-mediating, actually not with a younger person, somebody more of my generation, but we were going through the mediation, and as the story unfolded, it became clear that the teen was a teenage boy, that he was having a lot of trouble in school, and he really wanted to leave that school, and his guardian was not so sure that was a good idea. And then I realized that this young man was attending the school that both my sons went to, and I had a lot of feelings about that school as being a very difficult environment for certain kinds of kids and not a supportive school. And I just felt he needs to get out of that school. But I knew this was not my job or role. So I asked to take a caucus with my co-mediator, and I told her, and I said, look, this is just bringing up a lot of stuff for me, and I'm concerned that it's going to, permeate or affect my behavior in the mediation. So can you take the lead when we come back together? And I'll see if I can sort of calm down and assemble myself. And that's exactly what happened. And then gradually I became more comfortable and able to sort of put my own story aside, and we concluded the mediation, I think. I think actually, not because I told them to, but I think they did end up considering his changing schools, but it was such a relief, and I do feel it was better.